Hi, everybody, and welcome to Practical Astros. We're going to be talking to my new friend Liz of Liz Norman Astrology. I reached out to her on Instagram and just asked if we could meet and talk about a few things. So the first, we're going to just talk to Liz about her practice and her story. So welcome, Liz. Thanks for joining the channel.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me on. Exciting.
Yeah. I love to meet other astrologers wherever they are in the world. So can you tell the audience like where you're from, and let's get into your astrology story.
Yeah. So I'm based in the UK, in Worcestershire, in the UK. I'm born and bred in the UK, and my journey to astrology was different from a lot of other people because my original practice was through homeopathy and healing. So short history of my working life. I did the corporate thing, when I was much younger. I was a manager, I had the corporate ladder. Then, as astrologers out there will know, you get to your late 20s around your Saturn return. And I was like, this is not cutting it for me. This is not me. And by then I'd had my first child, and I discovered homeopathy for treating my first child. And so kind of the love of astrology goes way, way back, the reading of the books and the dabbling in it. But what happened at my first Saturn return, that responsibility of I'm a mom now and I have to take care of somebody, I discovered this wonderful form of natural medicine, homeopathy, and the lovely healing flower essences of the Bach flower remedies. And I did a big switch. And I changed and I studied. And so I had a phenomenal career training. I'm a qualified homeopath, a qualified Bach flower practitioner. And I ran with that for years and years and years. And astrology was always my number one hobby, if you like. So that was my background. I was lucky enough to administer a postgraduate course for 20 years. So I've been immersed in amazing homeopathy all of that time. But you know what? There was always a bit missing. There was always a bit where I was like, what can't I unlock in my patient? How do I get beyond that conversation we're having? And then literally in 2018, I was like, you know what? Now I have to actually study astrology, stop playing with it and formally study it. And that was it. That was the light bulb. That was the Uranus for me, because it was like, that's the missing piece of the jigsaw. Because immediately I learned that the language of astrology mirrors so much of the language of homeopathy and Bach flowers.
Can you expand on that? Like, how do you find those two adjacent or intertwining together?
Yeah, so some of just the very key principles of, astrology. My number one, I say to people who don't know astrology, is you are more than your sun sign. People will say, I'm a Leo, or they will say, well, I'm a Leo, but I don't resonate with Leo at all. Therefore, astrology is rubbish. Well, if we simply said that we were our sun sign, where the sun is, then that divides the population into 12. That's not individual at all. And so one of the key things of astrology is when we look at the birth chart, it's unique, isn't it? It treats you as a completely unique blueprint of all of the planets and how they interact vibrationally with each other. And when you're a holistic practitioner, you are looking at the holistic whole of the person and their unique expression of whatever it is that they're presenting. You don't say, you are your headache. You say, I want to know about your experience of a headache. So there is this real synergy of individuality within the context of the whole. So, as an alternative practitioner, you are looking at how does your dis-ease relate to the whole of your life? As a practitioner, I'm used to asking lots of questions. I'm used to going in deep and asking somebody, meeting them where they are.
Yeah.
And so you get that with astrology. You know, it's you are the sum parts of the whole of your chart.
Mm-hmm.
So because astrology and homeopathy are both effectively pattern recognition, aren't they? We're looking at, you know, and we're looking at vibrational patterns. And so I was able, when I first started learning astrology, I just got this weaving in and out of the individuality and the totality of the whole.
Yeah. So this is an astrology channel primarily, and I understand homeopathy, but can you explain homeopathy to people that may have heard that word, but just some bullet points of like them being able to put the pattern recognition and the like cures like of homeopathy within an astrology conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. So homeopathy is a system of medicine where you take the energy of a substance,
Mm-hmm.
and the idea being that when we take a minute dose of that, it awakens a person's innate healing ability, which we call the vital force, to remember to heal itself. Homeopathy is a catalyst for self-healing.
Mm.
So we're taking a really good example would be coffee. Okay, we all know if we drink way too much coffee, we're not going to sleep.
Yeah.
So the homeopathic remedy, coffea, is coffee diluted, 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 diluted. So there is no coffee in it anymore. It is the vibrational memory of coffee. And we take coffea, and it's one of the number one remedies to help our body reset itself to sleep.
Hmm.
So it's this remembrance. It's because we all carry within us, our human bodies are extraordinary tools.
Yeah.
And, you know, on a daily basis, we are, if we're too hot, we cool down. If we're too cold, you know, our bodies are constantly healing themselves, getting
Mm-hmm.
back to that state of health, homeostasis. Sometimes they get stuck. Homeopathy unsticks them
Yeah.
naturally, chemical free, and it's a lovely system of natural healing. And the batch flowers are very similar, but they work on a pure vibrational emotional level, and they are literally the essences of flowers and trees that are held in sunlight, and the vibration of those resonates with our own vibration. And really astrology is doing that, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
We are saying we are the sum total of the vibration of the universe.
Yeah.
So both of these systems are vibration based.
I love that. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And just connecting that you aren't just your sun sign or you aren't just your headache, I think is beautiful. You know, it's a great thing to think of, because sometimes if you get lost, especially in a state of dis-ease, if you have a headache, for instance, sometimes you see the world through the lens of I have a headache first before anything else. And so if you're hung up on just an astrological placement, like I have a 12th house sun or, you know, a 6th house moon or wherever it is, if you always kind of look at it that way, instead of understanding that it's in context to your entire, the entire web of your astrology chart, just like your experience of a bad meal or an injury it's not your entire life. It is connected to all the things that led up to it and the path forward to then heal from it. So how do you marry the two together? Like if you had this kind of Uranian aha moment within homeopathy to then welcome astrology and remember astrology to your own practice, how do you combine the two together? Like, do you read for your homeopathic clients?
Yeah. So it was the thing that you know, if we remember that a birth chart is the sum total, if you like, of our energy potential, isn't
Mm-hmm.
it? You know, we can express that potential really well, really mediocre, or in a challenging way. It's
Yeah.
an energy potential. Holistically, our body is also an energy potential. We have certain things that we can do individually that will make us more healthy. And that would be what we would call our constitution.
Mm.
So I use both. I'm a trained medical astrologer as well. So I look at physical complaints, I'll look at the onsets. It really helps me to look at, when I'm working with a client, is this something that they carry within themselves? Is this something that they want to really be working on, a lifestyle change to support their health? Or was it something that's more transitory because of the current movement of the planets? And then I can give them remedies to support them through that. But what was amazing was it unlocked such a deep level of questioning. I was able to look at the chart and see the potential of, okay, I'm looking at a client here. I'm sensing there's some suppressed anger. I'm looking at physical symptoms, which medically suppressed anger can come out as inflammation, skin rashes, and or anything, acid reflux, anything where we've got that tension. We see it in the chart. I was able to go deeper way earlier in the process of working, and the chart unlocked that. So much so that actually, as you said, we don't just define ourselves by one aspect of our birth chart. So there is medicine in the chart. There is medicine when we as astrologers say, yes, you have this may be slightly challenging, but you have these other aspects. Bring your conscious awareness to these parts of your chart. These parts of your psyche are where you remedy the dis-ease that you are feeling right now with that placement.
Yeah.
So much so that I did a complete flip, and around 2021 to 22, I flipped it, and I wasn't a homeopath who used astrology. I was an astrologer who used remedies. I always begin with the chart now. I always begin with the chart, because a chart reading is a catalyst for healing.
Usually that's why people are coming to you, is because there's some sort of, clients don't usually show up when everything kind of like everything's working, so tell me that it's working. Usually they're coming to you because like something doesn't feel right, or something has gone wrong, or I'm worried that something will go wrong. There is always like that princess and the pea irritation to like prompt it. But the idea of asking questions, I think, is something that is important for any sort of practitioner to do. And I've heard that feedback from clients that that they have had readings before where the astrologer just speaks at them the entire time. And I think that
I've had that.
Yeah.
I had many readings, and I really didn't like that. Somebody was telling me about me,
Yeah.
and like almost as if they were trying to prove they were good at astrology.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that does not interest me at all.
Yeah.
So interestingly, because of my background, I ask my astrology clients to send me an intake form. I ask them to send me details of themselves, because I want to meet them. The minute we start talking, I want to meet you where you are. I want to know what your gifts are, what are your aspirations, what are your struggles, what are your challenges. Then we find them in the chart, and we have a meaningful conversation about them. And then if I feel that they are stuck, and that the awareness in and of itself isn't enough to unstick, then I will offer remedies.
Yeah.
But you know what? I probably only give remedies half of the time. There's just that awareness where that beautiful sense of deep self-forgiveness. That's why I find this difficult. That's why I look at all these people around me, and like they find, say, studying really easy, or they find socializing really easy, and I struggle. Well, yeah, it's part of who you are, and you're beautiful and you're perfect because it's part of the whole of your birth chart.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think going back to the energy of that kind of chaotic fingerprint of a birth chart, because it is that moment of chaos. Even if you plan a birth, the birth never happens exactly how you plan. That's like lesson number one of parenting. It's like, guess what? It's out of your control at this point. But so there is that chaos of a birth chart. And I think that there's energies of that. I wanted to ask if you use the prenatal lunation as an energetic imprint with the birth chart itself, because having that moment in utero of the full or new moon just prior to birth, it seems like that's like an embodied imprint that also influences the native once they're born, and is also it is also a kind of a chaotic moment because it just happens to be the lunation prior to your birth. But the birth chart itself does really capture this energetic snapshot of, time is, what is it, time is a moving image of eternity. It's like there are so many energetic ways that those connections can happen, and we are the bodies that hold that energetic memory. And
Yeah.
it's in your website you said you look for the medicine in a chart, and I thought that was just such a beautiful way to look at it. Coming from your homeopathic background, it makes
Yeah.
sense, but I think all astrologers really are attempting to do that, or in some way. I feel like to practice astrology, you are attempting to do that. You just put it into really beautiful words, probably from your Gemini moon.
Yeah. I mean, I look at so much in a chart, and again, because I ask for details before I speak to somebody, I've
Mm,
already got a flavor. I've already got a flavor of where they are and a flavor of where the dis-ease may be.
mhm,
And then I come at it, okay, of course I'm going to look at the pillars of the birth chart, but I'm able to drill down into different things. So I'm going to look at all of those things, that, the pre-birth lunation, the nodal, I look at everything in that. And
mhm,
then another thing that you learn as a holistic practitioner is you don't get a shopping trolley full of symptoms when you
mm,
are treating a client. Okay, I could have someone in front of me and they've got the headache and they have a particular set of dreams and they're scared of spiders and they've got this and they've got this. Oh, and they've got toenail fungus. And, when they were 10, their hamster died. I could have like a book,
mm.
and if I tried to put all of that into a remedy and something meaningful, it would be
And
completely
effective.
unmeaningful because
Yeah.
it's messy. And so I think one of the things that my background helped me to do is to look for threads,
Mm,
is to say, okay, it's not what a lot of people call it in astrology, cookie cutter astrology,
mm,
and I've had readings like that, where someone goes, okay, your sun, and they'll rattle off, my son is in this sign, this house, these aspects, turn the page, your moon
mhm,
is in. And I'm like, but I'm me. I'm
mm,
like, I'm the vibrational whole. Where's the glue or the golden thread
mm.
that that is the meaningful thread in my chart? And that's something that I really look for. Is like, it's whether that's through any astrologers listening, through rulerships, through, I'm looking at lots of different threads to
Mhm.
say, what's the key theme here?
Yeah. Yeah, because you could Google, you could ask Chat GPT to list out definitions, but it doesn't give you the glue or the soul of the meaning of the
No,
reading. And that's why I
no,
think people come. They want to feel like that their existence has some meaning because they have this inkling that it does, and they want that reflected back to them. You
yeah,
don't want to just say like Taurus moon equals XYZ, in the 10th house means XYZ. It's like you can read all of that, but like unconnected sentences aren't poetry. They're just factual, and they're easy to forget. If you remind someone of what their stories are, they'll remember it. And to me, one of the hardest things in the early days of reading for people is that they're like, how I can't remember all of this, or I forgot what you said because it was just so much information. And it's like, yeah, it is a lot of information. You don't want to fire hose all of this information because as astrologers, you do look at so many things. So
yeah,
how do you choose, and what's the inspiration behind, if timing is everything, so is the reading. And so what is being called through in the reading to be shared at that point for that
yeah,
person with their natal chart and their transits. I think it's lovely that you have that homeopathic and flower essence background because it's primed you to really step into this role of being kind of that healer kind of consultant. Um,
yeah. And I think the big difference when I say to people is, I practice therapeutic astrology.
mm,
I am a therapist
mhm,
first, I'm looking for medicine. I'm looking for, to go deeper and for that very deep level of self-awareness. And I find a lot of clients come to me who've done a lot of therapy work, a lot of counseling as well, and they really enjoy the archetypal language that we use in astrology. And there's something very lovely about if we take the whole of our character, but what we do is we tweak it out, don't we? We say, okay, we're going to talk now about your motivation, passion, possible frustration, how you go for things in life. So we know we're talking about Mars, but we're able to take the archetype of that energy away from them just for a moment and talk about it in a very logical way, away from themselves, where it's all messy with all the other stories. And that to me is lovely because we take it away from the whole, we look at it on its own, we talk about it with lots of analogies, which suddenly you can go, oh, okay, yeah, I do get triggered by that. That's actually not a very healthy response. Let me look at that. Then we put it back in the whole.
Yeah.
And that is a medicine that I believe all astrologers do. They probably just don't think of it as a therapeutic process.
But that reintegration of self, it's like identifying these singular parts and then reweaving it. One thing that was on your website was talking about guidance for children. And you said that you moved into homeopathics because of your child. And I've had the experience that children and animals are so receptive to homeopathic medicine. And can you explain, if you agree with that, why that is, and then talk a little bit about what that offering is on your website about guidance for children with astrology?
So, children are, if we're lucky and a child can come to homeopathy early, then, they are going to be energetically easier to treat. And homeopathy is an energy medicine. And so they're going to be really receptive to remedies. We're not, as we get older and we have more and more illnesses or diseases, they can go into chronic states. So children and animals are much more blank canvases. They're easier to treat. Their responses that produce symptoms, because in homeopathy, symptoms are what we use to say the vital force is speaking to us. Children don't tend to mask them. When we get older, we get really clever. We get really clever at telling ourselves the stories, or we get into habitual behaviors of not listening to them. So the symptoms become not as clear in adults. Children produce much clearer symptoms unless they're heavily medicated. So, and they're really receptive. And, if you want to dispel placebo, if people say homeopathy is just placebo or batch flowers, well, look at what it does to plants, to animals and children. It's beautiful and the results are phenomenal. And as a mom, it was amazing for me because it empowered me to treat my own children. 3 o'clock in the morning, they've got croup. I could do something about that. I mean, I wasn't stupid. I would always ring emergency. Okay. We always do that. But there's a big bit in between my kids got a really nasty cough and ringing emergency. And it empowered me and I got results. And I was like, wow, this is really good. This is helping. And it's the system of medicine that my family uses. And I'm very grateful for that. So, I love using it with children. And I think every mum should do a basic 6-week course. Just learn how to use a handful of remedies. There's some really good first aid courses. And what will be interesting, instead of reaching for the Calpol or the fever reducer, you will reach for belladonna. And that's really empowering. So I would honestly recommend anybody to do that at that level, even if you just do it for first aid. So the reason I do children's guidance readings is probably like yourself. When I started learning astrology, there was this real epiphany moment for me, which is how key our chart is at saying we are individuals, and as parents, if we understand that our child is a complete unique individual. Why I do children's guidance readings, there was that breakthrough moment when you're studying astrology that it makes you really understand that we are all unique, completely unique beings. And as a mom, that's a real wow, I am a mom to 1, 2, 3, 4 little human beings, and they are the sum total of their charts. And so how they are going to emotionally respond to me will be their moon sign. Mm-hmm. I'm still me, but they're their moon sign. And so, I have 3 sons, grown-up sons, but they have 3 separate moon signs. They have 3 separate Mercuries. And so just that realization, I am saying the same thing. I'm me. They are hearing and receiving 3 separate ways of processing that information emotionally and intellectually. Game changer as a mom. No matter how old your children are, game changer, because that's why I do the children's guidance readings, because it puts us inside their way of being, their way of vibrating. So it's very much with the intention of how can I best guide this young person, this understand, and if say you've got 2 really outgoing parents and their child, and they have lots of fire and air in their charts, and they have a child that's got a really watery chart and a lot of energy that's very at the bottom of the chart, their child's here in this lifetime to be more introspective, to be more feeling, to be more intuitive. What a gift it would be for those parents to understand. Yeah, that's very different from how you are. So how are we going to dance that together?
Yeah. And often, even before I considered astrology, I thought, a lot of times children are brought into this world as their own healing for those 2 people karmically anyhow. And so to have something that has so much fire and air and all this kind of social agitation, having a very watery child is in part of their balancing, even though that child is their own individual. But just having compassion. I think that astrology can teach us how to have best compassion for those people in our lives. So I loved seeing that offering that you have. So you're reading for the parents, but considering the child's birth information.
Yeah, 100%. The child is centric in the reading. If I'm reading for teenagers, I tend to do a 2-part reading because I find it in all of my practice very disrespectful to talk about a child in front of that child. And so I often have 2-part readings with it if it's teenagers, and I will do the really basic sun, moon, rising, give that child some real oomph, because sometimes it's tough being a teenager. Give them some real thing. Ask them, what do you love? What do you like? And go, wow, that's in your chart. And get them a bit more fired up. Or if they say, I'm struggling with that, you can go, okay, look, we can see that. But how about you look at this in your chart? Then I'll have a separate conversation with mum, dad, carers, and I'll go, okay, look, there's some things that you didn't want to say in front of the child, things that are worrying you. Let's look and see where they might be coming from. Or it might just be that child is going through, even though they're really young, a massive astrological transit. And so if you've got a child going through a huge 2-year potentially transit, but they're only 14, that's a big percentage of their life. You might think that that's what their character is like forever. So that's really, really comforting to parents to go, okay, this is a process. How can I support that?
Yeah, that's really lovely. We haven't talked too much about the flower essences, but how do you how do you weave flower essences within practice, like and within medical astrology, which I think might be just a separate question. So maybe we'll pass on that for now. Flower essences, how do you kind of instruct people or talk to people about it? Um, and how do you see it? When does it call out to you when you look at it in a chart?
Yeah. I mean, actually, I've really gone for one of the key principles of homeopathy is less is more. We
Mm,
give minimum dose.
mhm,
We give enough remedy to be that catalyst for change. So instead of actually offering lots and lots and lots of remedies, my go-to now is that I use batch flower essences, which are really subtle, gentle, but very powerful emotional essences. The batch flowers or any of the flower essences work principally on our emotional state.
mhm,
And we know that mostly physical dis-ease will have an emotional root cause. If we've got the skin rash, we want to be looking at anger. We want to be
mhm,
looking at inflammation. We want, so there may be an emotional cause to it. So, or we have some just physical pathology. So
mhm,
I actually use batch flower essences for emotional
mhm.
dis-ease and supporting that, helping that client move through that process of change more easily.
Yeah,
I believe we could all do it with the work, with the awareness of the birth chart, actually. It just eases that process.
yeah.
So I give batch flowers for emotional, and they're lovely because we can really self-regulate those. They're
Mm,
very easy to administer because you cannot take too much of them.
mm,
And so I do those for emotional. And then if I have a biochemical support that I want to give to the physical body, I use the homeopathic tissue salts.
mm.
I often do both, but it's almost like I'm going for the biochemical and the emotional. And
Separately.
both are
Yeah.
really easy for people to integrate into their lives. Again, for my clients, I'm not having to manage big programs of remedies. If I
Mhm,
do, I tend to actually now defer to colleagues because I'm so busy in my own practice, I can't support really deep, long-term, chronic homeopathic care.
mm,
But 9 times out of 10, batch flowers, tissue salts, combination of both, they cover everything. And the batch flowers, anybody can use them. They
mhm,
are completely safe. They will work with any medication you're on. They will, in fact, they would probably help because they work on easing the emotions,
mhm. Yeah.
and one way I'd like people to think of that, like physically, is if you imagine your immune system is an army, yeah, it's an army fighting for you. And you really want as many of those soldiers, say there are 100 of them, and there's a virus going around. You'd really like 100 of your 100 soldiers to be there fighting that virus, wouldn't you? Well, if 30 of them are being triggered because of this problem you've got at work, and
Right.
you're stuck in that emotional frustration or anger or lack of confidence, you've only got 70 left. Then, if another 20 of them go and they're fighting another emotional battle, you've got less energy to fight the physical.
Mhm,
So we can all benefit from using those lovely essences. And we know our emotions ebb and flow.
mhm.
In astrology, it's the moon. The moon ebbs and flows with the tides. And so the flower essences, I take them really regularly. In the morning, I check in with myself. Where am I? Is there anything that's out of balance? Anything that needs tweaking? I pop a couple of drops in my water, sip that, balances me.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Even sometimes just holding a bottle of flower essences is enough. And I think I respond really well to the flower essences, and I always have. And I think it's because just being around the flowers themselves is medicine. And
Yes.
there is just something that just kind of cracks you out of that constriction of being kind of wound up and bound up with emotional. It's like the
Yeah.
idea of flower, the unfurling of flowers really does soften things. But yeah, just holding the bottle in your hand. When I worked at a natural food store as early as 20 years old, just stocking the flower essences was this really wonderful experience. And that was very different than just putting vitamin C on the shelf, or a soap or whatever it was. Like the flower essences were a particular
Yeah, and we can see
experience.
signatures, as there are a lot of really good resources on the internet. I they're easy to work with. There are only 38 batch flower essences.
Mm-hmm.
You can start weaving them. You can self-teach yourself on
Mm-hmm.
the internet and look at them. When you read them as an astrologer, you'll see them calling to archetypes. You'll
Mm-hmm.
see them there. Let's take elm, big tree. A lot of the tree remedies give strength.
Yeah.
And elm is all about being overburdened by responsibility. That weight of the world on your shoulders. It speaks of Saturn and Capricorn
Yeah.
so deeply. And so if you've got a client and they're stuck, or you're stuck in a Capricorn state or a big Saturn transit, elm just helps to raise that weight of Saturn for you.
Hmm. It's funny that you bring that up because I was um, thinking about the transit from Capricorn to Aquarius and having Saturn, traditional astrology or Hellenistic astrology rules both.
Yes.
But the difference in the two and kind of the joke of like just how long Saturn transits, if you're in a ZR period, a Saturn period, you're in it for a very, very long time because of that doubling up of Capricorn Aquarius, and how the expression of Saturn and Pluto, or that a Saturn ruled Pluto is different in Capricorn in that
Oh,
tangible earthy sense, but the energetics of it being in Aquarius and how we're starting to really uncover that as human beings alive during this time where Pluto is in Aquarius, and understanding the potential of energetics that maybe have been built up in Capricorn now are being released somewhat through Aquarius. And I think that
I think that's really interesting because, if you look at Capricorn, it's an earth sign. And so
Mhm.
you get that image of that tree, that tree, and it's rigid and it's rooted, which is good because it's grounded, but it's immovable
Yeah,
almost. And
yeah,
you feel the weight of that. And so, it's very different because it's the rulership of Saturn, of a yin earth sign, which is much more passive, much more receptive.
yeah,
And now, of course, we have the rulership of the yang expression of Saturn, which is the air sign of Aquarius. Very different. So I think that's a really good, I like to play again. The elements, that was a number one in homeopathy and batch flowers. We work with elements. We
mm,
talk a lot about fire, earth, air, how they play, and the tension of them. And that's the signs in
yeah,
astrology. So
yeah.
the languages just weave in and out. And immediately, I think yin, yang, what are the archetypes of the more passive earth and water and the more yang expressions? And then obviously, if you put in the modern rulership, you get that tension in Aquarius, that sort
Mm-hmm.
of restriction and break free.
Yeah.
Very, very different from the earthed.
Mm-hmm. I think that we're just going to see more of that through this,
Yeah.
next 20 years or 19 years of Pluto being in that Saturnine air sign, that yang sign of just releasing all of this, um, potential of energetic healing through astrology. I think that it's
And
it's just a massively fascinating time to be an astrologer during this transit.
what fascinates me, being the age that I am, is that I was one of the generation born in the 1960s with the Pluto Uranus conjunction in Virgo.
Mm,
So in my birth chart, I have Pluto Uranus Mars all together in Virgo. So no wonder I was motivated to do natural healing, Virgo.
yeah. Yeah.
And now that seed of the Pluto-Uranus in Virgo is reaching the trine at the beginning of Aquarius. Pluto is at the beginning of Aquarius, and Uranus will be at the beginning of Gemini.
Yeah.
And to me, that is energy. That is, you know, we're air and air. We've got Uranus in an air sign. We've got Pluto in an air sign. They're all about quantum. That really excites me.
Yeah.
Really excites me.
And if we think of just the air signs as the social signs of you know, the breath and the connection and the communication that share things that might seem disparate together, they fly over the tree line to be able to make those connections. That's it reiterates this idea that our own experience on Earth will be recognized as being, it's always been energetic, but I feel like we're going to recognize and communicate and speak to it and kind of make it come to life by just recognizing it through our thoughts and our communication. It's like, you know, wind doesn't have a shape. You just see that it's moving the trees, or you see that it's dusting up, you know, the dirt, or you see that it's blowing across the water, or it pushes a house down, or whatever it is. I feel like we're just going to see the results of that energetic quantum air influence that has always existed, but now it's really coming a bit more crystalline, or we're just able to see it a little bit more. And to me, that's homeopathics, and that is flower essences. So to wrap us up for the medical astrology, because I do have people ask me medical questions and readings, and I'm not a medical astrologer. I have experience of treating my own family with homeopathics and herbal medicine. I'm a trained herbalist, but I don't give medical advice, because it's just not, I'm not qualified to give other people advice. How do you approach medical astrology? I know that you studied under Kira, but like, when did you add medical astrology to your practice? And then how do you have like separate offerings for that, or do you incorporate that in readings? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I don't offer it separately on my intake form. I say, if you would like to cover any medical issues, we'll look at them maybe as part of the first session. If I feel it's much deeper, I will say, look, we need to book a follow-up, and we'll just talk about the physicals in your chart. But often, because so many of the physical manifestations have roots in mental and emotional dis-ease, it tends to come out as the whole. And there are key things that we are looking at in symptoms, whether that would be planetary influences. We look at the medical astrology houses, we look at the signs, which rule different body parts, which also rule different body systems. So you're bringing together, again, the chart is vibration. It's showing us where there is more tension in the vibration, and it can really help pinpoint the batch flowers that you want by sign and the homeopathic tissue salts that you want by sign. So what's really good is I always start with medical, with the symptoms first. You know, I would never, ever look at a chart and say, oh, you have your sun there, take this tissue salt. That's really, really
irresponsible.
poor,
Yeah.
Poor homeopathy, and actually quite poor astrology. We start with what symptoms are you manifesting? Then we go back to the chart to see where they're coming from. And then we go, oh, okay, we can see maybe this is actually coming from a deeper problem. And we're able to have a conversation about, you know, is it a hormonal imbalance, or is it a lifestyle thing? You know, the difference, the medical houses will show us, the first house is very much our body, our constitution, and the sixth house will show us our lifestyle. The sixth house being our daily diet routines, what we do day in, day out. So they're both medical houses, but they have a very different nuance. So we're looking at planets in those houses, and how I would treat those planets would be different because they're first house or sixth house. So it's working with those, with all of those medical training that I've had. But it really helped that I was a qualified homeopath first.
Right. I think just going back to the asking questions, you know, because you could see a chart And then it just almost feels like unsolicited advice to look at a chart without asking the question, because, a consultation isn't a lecture. It's not, let me show off how much knowledge that I have and make you feel inferior or ill-equipped of your own, existence. Asking the questions, this is what maybe this has traditionally been seen. Have you experienced this, or does that resonate with you? Even just asking those questions within a reading, because everybody's lived experience is going to be slightly different. There might be a mean average, but just to assume that what someone's experience is not a good practitioner in any modality. And so I think that it's just a good reminder that as an astrologer, ask more questions and maybe you have in the past, and see how the readings shift when you do that.
Yeah, really good advice. Yeah, great advice to end on. Even if you are not putting yourself out there as more therapeutic, I invite you to make the process much more two-way. I think it would be potentially rewarding for you and your clients.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, is there anything else you want to share about your practice or your journey, and how people can get in touch with you, and kind of what you have on the horizon for what you're doing?
Yeah, so probably the most exciting thing that I did was I launched my first course earlier this year, which is super niche, but it is literally astrology for homeopaths, because I'd spent the whole time going, oh wow, I wish I'd known that. I wish I'd known that. So I've had my first intake of that, gone really well, lovely students. They're all taking nuggets of astrology into their practice. That excites me. There's going to be more homeopaths out there using astrology. That makes me very excited. Second intake coming. That course is now full for June. Really happy with that. So yeah, I'm doing that. That's my exciting thing, which I'm loving doing. And in terms of my own practice, you can reach me if you literally Google Liz Norman Astrology. I'll come up at the top. My practice is called Jupiter Rising, because in my birth chart I have Jupiter on my ascendant. I literally do have Jupiter Rising. So you can Google that and I will come up hopefully at the top. My SEO is quite good. And you can book directly on my website. There's a couple of videos on there as well, and some podcasts that I've done. So yeah, that's how you can find me. And yeah, I just love it. I love weaving both together. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I found you on Instagram and followed you there, and just really love the things that you share. And so it was an easy ask to be like, hey, do you want to chat, just because you have like really such lovely bright energy. So thanks again for joining. I'll put all of your information in the show notes so people can click on it to book and find out more about your courses. So are you going to open up your course again later this year or next year for new students?
Yeah, so what I'm going to do is that's very niche, and I might then run that once a year because it's very niche, but it was a really good teaching format. So I'm also on the back of it, I'm going to flip it, and I am actually going to offer batch flowers for astrologers.
Nice.
Because I think, I wouldn't do tissue salts, that's slightly too medical, but batch flowers are really beautiful, gentle, and I think actually they work so well with astrology. So watch this space. That's the next offering that I'm going to do.
Beautiful. All right. Well, let's end on that. Thank you so much, Liz. And
thank you.
We'll see you next time.